kind of shifted from home field advantage to neutral site. Okay, church is okay. We're not opposing church. We're not going to fight church, but it's not where we always want to be. And I believe, and I don't know whether you guys are experiencing this or not, but we have now moved from neutral site to away game, hostile environment. And we've moved to the place where it's no longer the accepted thing. It now has become something that people have got to really, really want to do. And I want to be real hesitant to say, oh, we've moved in the United States of America into the age where the church is being persecuted. I've got family that serve where the church is being persecuted. What we are facing is not persecution like much of the world faces. I mean, I heard someone say, I'm being so persecuted because at the store they say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. Well, I don't think that's persecution. It may not be what you prefer, but it's not persecution. So as we move through those stages, you see, we kind of adopted at one point in time a philosophy comes from the movies, the Field of Dreams, build it, they will come. I don't know how many times in a coaching experience I've been sitting across the table from a pastor, a church planter, and they've said to me, we just get our building, everything's going to happen for us. We just get the building, everything's going to be good. Here's some things I want you to hear, some statistics that say when a new building is erected, typically a church experiences 2% sustained growth. Okay, let that sink in. Now, there's always a big bump when you first get the building, okay, but I'm talking about sustained growth. As a matter of fact, Ron Lewis, and these are a little bit dated. This statistic needs to be updated. The research needs to be updated, but I don't think it's that much different. Ron Lewis did some extensive research, and he found this out, that 85% of churches who build their dream auditorium never grow again. Stay where they are. I can take you to churches here in Ohio that built their dream auditorium, and they're still got running what they were, but there's not been any really significant growth take place since then. And so we begin to ask then, if those things are true, we've got to move beyond the build that they will come mentality to really understand what it means to have a culture that is built around multiplication. You say, where do you get the multiplication from? Well, you guys know, you are Bible people, and you can follow along with me if you want to, but you'll recognize none of these verses. I'm not dusting off the back pages of nowhere. In Acts chapter 2 and verse 41, church, they had added 3,000 souls. Pretty sweet day of Pentecost. 2:47, the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. Acts 4:4, the number of the men came to about 5,000. Pretty good things happening. Acts 5:14, believers were increasingly added to the Lord, multitudes, both men and women. But then we get to Acts 6:7, and I love what happens there. It says, the number of disciples multiplied greatly. That's where I want to see us get to again, is the place that we have. You see, the early church understood two basic principles. They understood the gospel transforms lives. The gospel transforms lives. And they understood that they were to be ambassadors. They took seriously what it says in 2 Corinthians 5, that we are new creation. We're new creatures. Old things have passed away. And that he became sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God. And they took seriously that word in between that says we are ambassadors for Christ. So here's the first point that I want you to see. And we're not on our 7 points here. We'll get to point number 1 on the 7 there, but this is still introduction. I don't know how you structure your church, but think with me about this. So you've got a leadership team, and so your leaders, and however that shapes out for you, it may be that it's the pastor, and you got elders, or maybe you got deacons, or maybe you got a church council, leadership team, whatever you call them. And then most of our churches have several ministries going on. So you've got the worship ministry that's taking place. That you got a worship team and they're doing those kinds of things. Then you've got over here you've got some kind of small group ministry, and you know whatever you call small groups, life groups, grow groups, whatever you call them, Sunday school, whatever. You got some kind of small group ministry going on. Then perhaps you've got a children's ministry going on. And your children's ministry is just, whether for you that looks like Awana, or whether it's Upward Basketball, or what, a Vacation Bible School, whatever you're using to children's ministry. And then you've probably got some kind of student ministry, and that's your students, and you're reaching students, and you got some kind of student ministry going on. That's a real good thing to have. You may have already started in your church men or women's ministry. So you've got the men that are meeting, and brotherhood kind of thing that are meeting together, women's ministry that are going on. And then sometimes we'll add something we call our evangelism ministry. So we've got maybe an evangelism committee, maybe we've got a team that are really in charge of evangelism, that are pushing on evangelism. They're pushing that button, they're pressing on it real hard. And you see all those things taking place. Here's what I want you to hear today. That if we're going to create a culture of evangelism that leads to multiplication, this has got to make a move to here. Evangelism can't be just one of the ministries of the church. We've got to come to the place where now, at the heart of who we are, our DNA is that we are evangelistic. That it becomes a part of everything we do. That every time we make a decision as a leadership team, we're asking, how is this going to help us share the gospel? How is this going to be a part of impacting the world's greatest need, lostness, with the world's greatest answer, Jesus? So every time we do something, whether it be our student ministry, or our children's ministry, or small groups, our worship ministry, men or women, or whatever others you've got there, we're always asking the question at the leadership level, how is this impacting our community with the gospel? That's the first overall big picture that I want you to see today. And to understand, that's what it's got to become part of our DNA. It's got to be automatic for us. It's got to be something that we default to as a church if we're going to impact lostness for His glory. And so that's where we've got to start. Now, an obvious question is, okay, it's nice for you to tell me that, but how do we get there? Let me just walk you through some things, and I don't have all the answers, and we're going to do some question and answer time somewhere along the way today, and so I want you to think through some of these. Number one on your outline there is to start with prayer. Now, what I mean by that is not that you start praying for lost people. You need to do that. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I mean your church, your leadership team, your core group, whatever you got, have got to start asking the Father, how do you want us to be involved in engaging the lostness? Because you see, if I come in here today and I give you a method, you may think, I like that method. And we will talk about some methods. Methods are good. I'm not ready to throw out methods. But I give you a method and you think, that sounds pretty good. And I take that back and I try to implement that method. We give that method a good 3 months try. And You know the old commercial, I've seen this thing or two, so I know a thing or two. Well, I've been around long enough that in about 3 months, I get a call from you and says, it doesn't work. And if you don't hear anything else I say today, hear this line. It never works. Jesus is what works. He works. If I give you a method and you go out of here trusting that method, we've wasted our day. Start by seeking the face of God. Matter of fact, let me give you a quick illustration from the Bible. If you want to look at this, most of you guys know this. Go with me to 1 Chronicles just real quickly. And 1 Chronicles chapter 14. 1 Chronicles chapter 14. Some of you remember this from the life of David. David is just getting started in his rule and reign. So if you're in 1 Chronicles chapter 14, go down with me to verse 8. I'm going to do this real quickly, time's sake. Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel. They all went in search of David. David heard of it. Now the Philistines had come and raided in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of God, should I attack the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me? The Lord replied, attack, and I'll hand them over to you. They went up. You know what takes place there. Like a bursting flood, it says down there, God had used me to burst out against my enemies, is the way he names the area there. The Lord burst out. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David ordered that they had burned it with fire. Powerful victory. So look at the next verse. Once again, the Philistines raided in the valley. Stop there. Same valley, same enemies, same David. My tendency used to be, okay, God, I got this. We did it once before, right? We'll just do it the same way we did it last time. Does that make sense? Same enemy, same valley, same army. Same battle plan. Wrong. Look what it says. So David again inquired of God, and God answered him, do not pursue them directly. You're going to do this different than you did it the last time. Do not, but circle around and attack them opposite the balsam trees, or you may have a different translation here. But when you hear the sound of marching, then you're to go out the battle. God will give them ahead of you and strike down the army of the Philistines. So David did as God commanded him. What I want you to say to you today is, don't just say, okay, here's what we're going to do for evangelism this year. Same thing we did last year. It worked well last year, so why change? Don't just say, well, I saw Discovery Church, Philip, doing it this way. Let's do it the way Philip does it. That may not work where you are. That when I say start with prayer, I mean get your people on their face before God, saying, God, we need you to show us the plan for evangelism. That's where we've got to be. That is so absolutely. And you see, here's the truth. When I seek him and I bring my life under alignment with what God is doing, he will move heaven and push back hell to accomplish his purposes. But listen to me. God has no obligation to support your plan. I like what some of the writers said in that little book, Leadership by the Book. You want to make God laugh? Tell him your plans. I don't know about you, but about half the time when I'm praying, I kind of expect to hear God say, well, Steve, I never thought of that. Just how goofy is that? We think we've got a great plan. We're going to run into prayer, tell God, here's our plan, lay it out. God, please bless my plan. Spend some time seeking the face of God. know His plan. You see, here's what I want you to hear. There is no template for ministry that will eliminate our entire dependence upon Him and our need to talk to Him daily. There's no template for ministry that will eliminate our entire, complete, utter dependence upon Him and eliminate the need for us to talk to Him daily. We've got to learn to live in that relationship with Jesus and embrace that. As a matter of fact, if you embrace a program, I like what Henry Blackaby says. He says, if you embrace a program and abandon the relationship with Jesus, that is spiritual adultery. So don't do that. Make sure your relationship there is where it ought to be. He will lead you when you depend upon Him for your guidance and time. I know I spent a lot of time on point number one, and some of you are thinking, well, this is going to be all day long. Well, the rest of them I'll hit much more quickly, but this one's so important. It's so foundational that you've got to make sure you're seeking the face of God and His plan. Now, obviously, under prayer, you do need to be praying for lost people, however you choose to do that. 10 most wanted list, your VIP list, or Bless Every Home is a great little tool. We use it at my house. Gives us the names of our neighbors that we can pray for, and we love that Bless Every Home. I've got it set up. You can set it up any way you want. Mine comes 3 days a week with 5 new neighbors to pray for, and I pray for them. So whatever it might be for you, you find a way to pray for them so that your heart beats with the heart of God for the lost and lostness. You see, until we are praying, then it's more of an academic kind of process, or it's more of just going through the exercise. But when we pray, we get God's passion for lostness. And as we seek God's face, we begin to know Him and trust Him. And then let me say one more thing about prayer. You understand, I hope you understand, that impacting lostness is taking back ground from the enemy. And it will be a spiritual battle. And if you haven't discovered that yet, you're going to learn that when you get serious about pushing back lostness, the enemy gets serious about pushing you back. And unless you fight the battle in prayer, then you're going to be struggling every step of the way. So prayer is number one. Let me rush on. Number two. I talk about expanded vision there. Is really capturing the vision. So after you've prayed and you begin to seek the face of God, here's a little exercise. I want to do this with you quickly. You can do this with your leadership team when you get back. If you'll turn over the back of your sheet there somewhere, find a blank page. I want you just real quickly, write down 10 words, not phrases, not sentences, 10 words that you would like to characterize your church 3 to 5 years from now. 10 words. Just don't overthink it. 10 words. 10 words you'd like to say, these characterize my church 3 to 5 years from now. These are words I'd like people to be using to describe our church 3 to 5 years from now. 10 words. All right, you got close to 10 words there somewhere. Okay, here's going to be the hard part now. If you got 10 words, I want you to scratch 5 of them. If you only got 7, scratch 2. scratch, just make a decision. I got to scratch 5 of them. I can only be left with 5. I know it gets hard now because you were pretty passionate about those words when you wrote them down. Scratch them. Leave 5. All right? Next part of the assignment. Rank those 5, 1 to 5, with 1 being top priority. Rank them in order of priority. And I know, again, it's hard. This one, I really want this one, but this one's, no. Okay. Just like in, don't overthink it. Just rank them. 1 to 5. Okay. Let's turn the screw one more time. Scratch 4 and 5. Scratch 4 and 5. Now here, we're not going to take time to do this, but here's what I would challenge you to do. And if you do this with your leadership team, it'll be a great exercise. Take those top 3 and just write a paragraph of what that really means. What will it take for us to have this word describe us in 3 to 5 years? 2 or 3 sentences, not a long paragraph, not an essay, 2 or 3 sentences. Then boil it down to 1 sentence for each of those 3 words. 1 sentence that summarizes what you mean by those 3 words. And then, if the Lord would have you, and you feel His leadership, focus on 1 of those. What I'm finding with a lot of churches that want to make changes, they get a long list of things they want to do, and they get about a month or 2 into it and think, we can't get all this done, so let's just scratch it. Pick out 1 thing. For the group that I work with here in Ohio, we have boiled that 1 sentence down to inviting churches to rediscover multiplication. You say, don't you do anything else? Well, yeah, there's some other things we do. But we're going to ask the question for everything we do, are we inviting churches to rediscover gospel multiplication? If it doesn't fit under that sentence, we don't need to be doing it. And we've gotten some trouble because some things we've stopped doing that were some people's sacred cow, but it was not helping us to help churches rediscover gospel multiplication. So that's key. Okay, I've got the 2 big ones out of the way now. Let me run. 3, abundant seed sowing. You need to make sure that you are sowing seeds abundantly. Your evangelism cannot be 1 man behind 1 pulpit for 1 hour, 1 day a week. Your evangelism needs to be everybody involved, wherever they are, 24/7. You need to find ways to get people involved in abundantly sowing seed so that it comes to the place, as Mark 4:8 says, that you have that 30, 60, and 100 times. It's got to happen. Think with me. Some of you guys know this illustration. This is old stuff. A day of Pentecost. If we could say, let's have a day of Pentecost every day. Wouldn't that be sweet? 3,000 souls saved every day. Do you know that if we had 3,000 souls saved every day of the week, it would take 6,400 years to reach the 8 billion people that are alive on the face of earth right now. And that assumes that nobody can be born or die in that 6,400 years. But if I make a commitment to reach 1 person in the next 6 months for Jesus, and I disciple somebody else to reach 1 person for Jesus in the next 6 months, at the end of that 6 months, the 2 of us say, we're going to disciple another person. And we become 4. At the end of that 6 months, we become 8. If you do that in 16 and a half years, you can reach 8 million people for Jesus. 8 billion people for Jesus. Got my M's and my B's. I'm not used to talking about billions. I don't know about you, but I'm not even really used to talking about millions. But anyways, but in 16 and a half years, by multiplication, we can reach 8 billion people and see God do some incredible things. Number 4, frequent intentional training. People who get really good at something frequently train intentionally. And here's what I want you to think. For some of you, this will be a new paradigm. Some of you already understand what I'm talking about. Think train, not teach. We have taught evangelism for years. We have not trained people to do evangelism. There's a difference, a world of difference. People got a lot of head knowledge because we've taught them something. We need to train them to do something. That includes reps. When you do training, you want to know how many reps you're doing. We've got to do reps. You need to find the method that works for you. I like, that the Fergusons, Dave and John Ferguson, identified that little plan that they called Jesus' plan, where I do, you watch, then we talk. Then I do, you help, and we talk. And then you do, and I help, and we talk. And then you do, I watch, and we talk. And then you do, and someone else watches, and you start to cycle over. Find a method that works for you. I know a lot of our missionaries use what they call the MAWL method, M-A-W-L. The MAWL method, which talks about model, assist, watch, and then leave. The Way of the Carpenter is a great little tool where you identify, is this a novice, is this an apprentice, is this a journeyman, or is this a master teacher? And how you train in each level is different. You find what works for you, but you train people. In the little book that you have one available if you want it on your way out the door, turning everyday conversations into gospel conversations, he's going to talk a lot about training people. And I'm just quoting him so that you know when you read it in there, just remember where you heard it first, but no. He's going to talk about training methods. And if you want to pick that little book up on your way out, free of charge, please do so. Then, number 5, rapid obedience. Get people involved immediately who are new believers. I remember hearing my pastor say when I was growing up, when things got slow at church, the best thing he could do was go out and lead somebody to Jesus and then go with them to visit all their friends. The longer we serve Jesus and the more we move up the leadership ladder, the fewer non-believers that we've got in our circle of influence. So get those new believers. And you say, well, is that really okay? I didn't see the woman at the well stop by seminary on her way into town in John chapter 4. I didn't see Jesus say to the man who was healed of legions, spend some time studying and then go tell your friends what God has done for you. He says, go tell your friends what God has done for you. And I know Paul spent that time in the desert, but it says of Paul in Acts 9:20, immediately after his salvation experience, he began proclaiming Jesus in the Son of God, in the synagogue that he is the Son of God. Don't put him to work immediately. That's what we call rapid obedience. Embrace that strategy. Too often, we want to move them from being converted to comfortable. And that just really can mess up the process. And so that's important. They are uniquely positioned to tell others about Jesus. Number 6, celebrate the stories. You replicate what you celebrate. And so now, you need to share what God's doing. People need to hear about how God is seeing others come to faith. And you need to share those stories. We were talking at breakfast the other day, Philip and a group, about how when they do the baptism, somebody shares their testimony. You video that or they share whatever is doing. And that's such an encouragement to everybody else. And I know Philip does it, and probably many of you do that too. That's just a great way to share the story. Now, a couple of cautions about celebrating and sharing the story. Number one, when you celebrate, make sure Jesus is the hero of the story. Don't try to celebrate in such a way that you make sure everybody sees the S on your chest. It's not about you. You don't have a red cape. And you need to make sure Jesus is the hero of the story. I love what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1:29. He says, no flesh will glory in his presence. So if you're getting glory, he's not there. And again, we can go over to Isaiah 42:8. My glory I will not give to another. And then the second caution is not only make Jesus the hero, but don't treat people like your trophy. You don't need to be mounting their head on your Facebook wall as a trophy. Treat them with respect, but celebrate what God's doing and share them. And if anything, they're a trophy of God's grace, and treat them as that. Number 7, at the end, is I love the fact that you as a group understand the need to be planting new churches. We've got to be multiplying churches. We need churches of all shapes and all sizes, and we need to be planting churches. I love, as some of you know, the Nick Rickman, Insanity of God movie and book, and I love his second book, The Obedience of Insanity, Insanity of Obedience, his second book. He makes this statement. This is from Chinese church leaders. Chinese church leaders make this statement. We do not consider church members to be true followers of Christ until they have led other people to Christ and until they have helped plant more house churches. 2 criteria to know whether or not you're a true follower. Have you led other people to Christ? And have you helped plant another house church? We need to be planting churches. And it's so important for us. He goes on to talk about persecution. He says, the ultimate goal of the persecutor is to keep you silent. So when I'm silent, I'm identifying with the persecutor. When I share the message of Jesus Christ, I'm identifying with the persecutors, the persecuted. And it's so important for us to share that message to them. And powerful experience. Then I'll close with this. The final reminder that I want to give you is don't forget the second imperative of the Great Commission. We have heard for years, and you have probably preached and taught for years about the imperative of the Great Commission is to make disciples. We know that the go, baptize, and teach are participles that modify the imperative, and so we are to make disciples by going, baptizing, and teaching them to observe whatsoever I've commanded you, and that's important, and that first imperative is absolutely critical. Some of you that know, and I'm not a Greek scholar, I just read some people who are. Some of you know that there is a second imperative in the Great Commission. And it's that word that in the New King James is translated lo. So it doesn't often get a lot of attention. In the CSB, it's translated remember. In the Amplified Translation, it's translated behold. In the New Living Translation, be sure of this. And the Passion Translation translates it to never forget this. So there's a command there at the end of the Great Commission that says there's something we must remember. There's something we must never forget. There's something we must hold on to. And you know what that is. I am with you always. Most powerful impact that we can have in evangelism is when we remember Jesus is with us always. I like, again, CSB translates I'm with you always, in the Amplified, perpetually, uniformly, on every occasion. Message, day after day. Listen to this sentence from John MacArthur. I am, which is the I am with you, I am is emphatic. I myself. He says Jesus is calling special attention to the fact of Christ's own presence. And so he kind of puts it in his words. Now pay special attention to what I'm about to say, because it is most important of all. I myself, your divine, resurrected, living, eternal Lord, am with you always, even to the end of the age. Paul had to be reminded of that in Acts 18. when God told him, do not be afraid, but speak. Do not keep silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack to hurt you. I have many people in this city. So I want to encourage you today. Don't forget the second imperative of the Great Commission.